So, Dr. Laffer, you've advised President and shaped decades of economic thoughts. And before we begin, I just want to say what a privilege it is to learn directly from you. Thank you so much for joining us in CNBC Indonesia.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Safrina.
Thank you,
Doctor. It's a real pleasure, too.
So, Doctor, how would you assess the current states of the global economy in 2025? Are we heading toward a healthy recovery or facing deeper challenges?
I personally believe that we're heading towards a better recovery. I think it's going to be a very good period the next 5 years or so in the world economy. I think we're in the midst of resetting all the policies with the new administration here in the United States. President Trump and the Republican House and Senate are resetting up. Obviously, we all know the trade relationships are being reset, but also the tax plans, the government spending, regulation, all of these as well are being reset within the United States. And I think they're being reset in a very good direction, and that the world economy should do very well over the next 4 or 5 years.
Wonderful. Are there specific indicators or regions you are closely monitoring as bellwethers for where the global economy is heading next, Doctor?
Yeah, well, there are two special areas that obviously have to be focused on. One is the United States, which is extremely important. It's a large share of the world economy. The other is China, which is also a huge share of the world economy. And how the two countries get together and how they work together is extremely important. If there is a good trade relationship and a good personal relationship between the United States and China, you will have peace and you will have good economics. And I think that right in the last couple of weeks, the relationship has changed dramatically for the better. We have come through an agreement. We have a 90-day agreement with China, which lowers tariffs and restrictions dramatically. And that has been great for the markets. And I think the relationship between China and the United States will improve dramatically over the next several years. And I think on economics is the tip of the spear. And if economics goes well, everything else follows. And if the U.S. and China develop good trade relationships, which I think they will, I think this will lead to a great and prosperous world economy.
Right. In April this year, Donald Trump announced to the world the so-called Liberation Day tariff, showing again that he is taking a protectionist approach towards U.S. economy. But in an interview later that month, you also have stated that this tariff policy could create a downturn in the economy. Could you please elaborate more on that?
Yeah. If the protectionism, as you mentioned, continued, it would lead to a downturn. We have lots of experience which says that protectionism does not make for prosperity, just the reverse. We have the Smoot-Hawley tariff in the United States in the late 1920s, early 1930s that led to the Great Depression. I was in the White House in the 1970s with Richard Nixon when we had protectionist policies. That led to a bad economy, a very bad world economy as well. And then we have on the other side, we have John F. Kennedy, who lowered tariffs, was less protectionist, free trade, and Ronald Reagan and also Bill Clinton were free trade, and you saw the prosperity. So the evidence is very, very clear that protectionists lead to a bad economy and free trade leads to a good economy. My assessment, Safrina, is that Donald Trump was doing the tariffs and being protectionist in conversations to bring China and other countries to the table to negotiate much freer trade. I think Donald is a free trader, and we will have good prosperity following free trade.
Yeah. In your view, what are the long-term implications, actually, of prioritizing domestic insulations over global integration, particularly in the context of highly interconnected supply chains? So just so we all know.
Yeah, well, the supply chains have been very interconnected, and they've been based on, obviously, comparative advantage, which is what you want to have happen. What has not happened is that there have been a lot of protectionist barriers, and they do primarily are by the big countries. The U.S. is the most free trade, and I think what happens now is you're going to see a lot of countries lowering their tariffs, lowering their protectionist barriers, non-trade barriers, quotas, and that will lead to much better supply chains, much better international cooperation and economic integration. So I am very excited that the next 5 years will see a lot better integration of the world economy, supply chain links working together to where everyone is made better off. That's the direction I think we're going, and we will see very shortly. But I'm very hopeful, especially with the recent negotiations with China, which cut those tariff barriers down dramatically, way down. And that's where we need to go.
Okay. I mean, still on this dynamics, following the announcement of Trump tariffs just a month ago, we could see that other countries retaliate by imposing higher tariffs toward the United States. And on the other hand as well, Doctor, some countries are lining up to have a meeting with the U.S. to discuss a trade agreement. In your op-ed as well in Wall Street Journal, co-authored by Steve Moore, you wrote that the best reciprocal tariffs are no tariffs. That said, could you please elaborate more on how countries should respond regarding the ongoing global trade tensions?
Yeah, what you said is very true. The tariffs were announced a month ago at Liberation Day, and high tariffs on every country. Since then, the negotiations have been done with Great Britain. They just had the interim agreement with China, which was amazing, which is lowering those tariffs dramatically and setting a new table where we have much lower tariffs. What Steve Moore and I wrote about was that it would be a much better world with free trade is very true. And I think Donald Trump and this administration is going to negotiate much more free trade deals with other countries than existed before. So I'm excited that it will be a lowering of trade barriers, not an increasing. The prospects of a trade war, a tariff war, I think are much less today than they were, let's say, a month ago or half a year ago. Much less, and I think we will get free trade. Donald Trump in his first term had 5 trade deals, 5 of them. One with the U.S., Mexico and Canada, which was freer trade, one with Japan, which was freer trade, one with South Korea, which was also freer trade, one with Brazil and one with Colombia, both of which were a lot freer trade. So Donald Trump is in a negotiation mood to get lower tariffs, not higher tariffs. I know it looks funny how he negotiates, but that's what he did in the first term, and that's what he's doing right now, getting better free trade for integration of the world economy.
So, Doctor, as a part of a joint statement released by the White House, the U.S. has agreed to reduce its import tariffs on Chinese goods from 145 to 30%, while China will lower its tariff on U.S. products from 125 to 10%. And these adjustments are set to take effect May 14, 2025, on a 3-month trial basis. So we really would like to know, Doctor, how significant is this move in the broader context of global trade realignment? And what kind of ripple effects might we expect across emerging markets, especially like Indonesia?
Yes, but it's a huge, huge deal, to be honest with you, that when President Xi and President Trump get together and agree on this, it is an amazing accomplishment and will lead to a much freer world economy. I don't know all the details, but your 30% and your 10% are correct. It's a 90-day period that will be tried, and I think during that 90 days, China and the U.S. will negotiate much lower tariffs than the 30 and 10%. There'll be much better trade. And I think in addition, Safrina, I think in addition, there will be a lot of discussion of politics, of Taiwan, of South China Sea. And I think for Indonesia especially, it will lead to an increase in prosperity where Indonesia would be able to do business with both China and the United States without worrying about offending either country. It will be good economics for Indonesia. It'll be good politics. The risk of a war, I think, has been lowered dramatically. Just look at how the stock market has gone straight up.
That's true.
Xi and President Trump got together. It's very big news and it's very good news. And I expect only better things in the future. I think this is going to be terrific, the cooperation with the U.S. and China.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, let's talk about Southeast Asia. How do you view the economic trajectory of this region, and what role can it play in the shifting global landscape?
I think Southeast Asia is extraordinarily important to the world economy. I mean, Indonesia is a very large country and has a very big impact on the world. And my view is that if we had a good free trade world economy, Indonesia not only will be a large contributor to the prosperity of the world, it will be a large beneficiary as well of good trade. And I see nothing but excellent growth for Indonesia in the near-term future. You know, I should tell your audience that I was the first American in modern times to go to China. I went in the White House in 1970.
Wow.
And I went to China just before Kissinger went to China.
Wow.
And when I got to China, I looked at it, and I was not looking for good things in China. The Korean War had been very bad. And I fell in love with China. China is the most miraculous economic recovery from 1970 to the present of any country in the world. And I expect that type of prosperity to transform itself into Indonesia and Southeast Asia as well. I think you're in for a very good period of time in the world economy.
Well, Dr. Laffer, what a great start to our conversation. We'll pause for a moment, and when we return, we'll dive even deeper. Don't go anywhere.